Alright then, so we can now successfully log in and sign out of the application, and that's all working. But as of yet, we cannot sign a new user up from the application. If we log out, then go to sign up and we fill all this in, at present all it does is take all of this data which is being stored on the state of this component and it logs it to the console, right? And we're not doing anything with that data. What we'd like to do is make a request to the Firebase project that we have and create that new user with this information. So where are we going to do that? Well, I think we should make an action creator to perform that asynchronous task to go out and sign that user up. So let's create an action creator for signing up. So this is going to be done inside auth actions. So open up this file. We already have sign in and sign out, but we need to create a new one now. So let's export a new const and we'll call this sign up. And this is a function. Now we're going to take the new user that we want to sign up into this function. And we'll pass that in from the component when we call this action creator. So attached to this is going to be all of this data, the email, password, first name and last name, right? Because we're storing that on the state of this component and we'll pass that into the action when we call it. All right then. So inside here, we need to return a function, and this function will take in the dispatch, get state, and then finally a third object. And in here, we can destructure, get Firebase, and also get Firestore. We're going to use both of those because remember, we use get Firebase to sign a new user up using the authentication service by Firebase, and we need get Firestore to communicate with our Firestore database. And remember, when we had a look at this diagram a while ago, we said that when we create a new user, the auth service is going to store information like the email and the user ID, and it's going to auto generate this. But we also want to store additional information about that user, and we can do that by adding a users collection in our Firestore database and then creating a new record or document for each individual user. So when we create a user over here, we want to take this UID that is generated by Firebase Auth and then create a new document in the users collection to correspond with this UID. So the ID of the document is going to be the same as this. And that is what is going to allow us to identify that these two things are the same. This user in the auth service and this user in the Firestore collection, right? So what we need to do, first of all, is sign that user up using the auth service. So inside the function, we'll say const Firebase is equal to get Firebase and invoke that function. So we also need to say const Firestore is going to be equal to get Firestore, like so. Okay, so now we can use this Firebase to interact with Firebase Auth and generate that new user. So we'll say Firebase.auth, and then we're going to use a method called create user with email and password. A very long method. All right, have I spelled that correct? Yeah, looks like it. So in here, we need to pass an email and password, and that is going to be stored on this object because that is going to have the email and the password field right here. So we need to say new user.email first of all, and then new user.password as the second parameter. So that is going to go ahead, communicate with Firebase and create that new user for us. Now that is asynchronous. It will take some time to do. So we tack on the .then method, and then we take a callback function in this .then method, which will fire as soon as this action is complete. Now inside this callback function, we can take the response of this thing right here. So this response is going to contain information about the user that we've just signed up, and that will be stored on response.user. Okay, so the user property of whatever we're sent back. So we'll access that in a minute because we're going to need to, because the next thing we want to do is create a record in the Firestore for this user that's just signed up. So we'll now say return, and I'll say why we return it in a second, Firestore.collection, and we want the users collection, and it doesn't matter that this users collection doesn't exist yet. If it doesn't exist, then Firebase will go ahead and create it for us when we want to dump something in it. Now we want to add a new document inside this collection, and previously to do this we used a method called add, Now, when we use that method, Firestore automatically generates an ID for that document for us, but we don't want to do that. We don't want a second auto-generated ID. We want to use the ID that Firebase has automatically assigned to this user so we can sync the two up. Now we can get that ID from this response object. So instead of using .add, we say .doc and we reference a specific doc ID. So we pass in here response.user.uid, and that is going to get us the ID of the user, which is auto-generated right here. And now what we're doing is creating a new doc with that ID right there. So the two IDs are going to be the same. Now we've got a reference to that document. Now we want to set some properties inside that document. So we use the set method and pass in an object. Now, what are the different properties we want for this user? Well, we want a first name, we want a last name, and we also want the initials. So first of all, first name, and that is going to be new user.firstname. So we're going to pass that in to this thing right here. Okay? And the last name is going to be new user.lastname. And then finally, we want the initials to be stored, and that is going to be the new user. And we're not storing anything called initials on the new user. We don't capture that right here. But what we can do is just take the first letter of the first name and concatenate it with the first letter of the last name. So let's do that. We'll say new user.firstname and then position 0 to get the first letter. Concatenate it with new user.lastname and then position 0. Now, we don't really have to store this. We could just do all this when we get the first name and last name from the database in our component whenever we want to output the initials. But I think it's a good idea to store it so that whenever we want to use them, they're there ready and we don't have to do this manipulation again. All right, so now we're storing that data inside our new document and we're returning this promise. So this function is going to return a promise. Therefore, on the outside function, we can chain on another then method to say, okay, well, when that has completed, then we want to do something else. So at this stage, we're going to have created the user and also created a new user record for that in Firestore. So now this is the point when we want to then, inside this callback function, dispatch an action, which is going to say, okay, the sign up was a success. So let's do that. We'll say dispatch, and then inside here, the type is going to be sign up underscore success. Okay, so we don't need to pass any data in here. We're not going to amend the state of the store. We'll just pass in the type and we can do something with that later. Now, if either of these two things failed, then what we can do is catch the error right here. So we'll catch that, send it into a callback function. Then we'll make a different type of dispatch. And the type of this dispatch is going to be sign up error, and we can pass the error as the second parameter, which we receive right here. Okay, so we're making two different dispatches here. So let's handle these two things inside the reducer. So make sure you go to your auth reducer, and we'll do a case for each of these now. So underneath this case, we'll do another one, and this is going to be first of all for sign up underscore success. So if this is the case, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we want to log this to the console so we can keep track of what's happening. So console.log, and then inside there, we'll say sign up success. And then below that, we're going to return a new object which represents the state. We're going to spread the current state so we don't override anything. Then we can override the auth error. Now, if this is a success, if we correctly sign up, then we don't need an error anymore. So we'll set that to null. Okay. So now we do the other case, which is sign up error. And inside here, we want to console, not in capitals, console.log, sign up error. And then with the state, we'll spread the current state. So state, and then we want to say the auth error is going to be equal to the error that we pass in on the action. Remember, we pass in the error right here. So that's attached to the action over here. So we can say action.error. And on this error that's returned to us, we get a property called message. So if we wanted to, we could output that message right here. So that could be something like email not valid or password not long enough or something like that. So we can get that we can store it on this thing right here, on the state, then we can output that error on the signup component if a user doesn't enter in the information correctly. Alright, so now we have the auth action created and the auth reducer. All we need to do is call this stuff from our component so it all runs, and then we can sign up a new user. Alright then, so let's go into the auth folder, then it's in the signup component. So at the minute, when we handle the submit event, currently all we're doing is logging the state to the console. And remember, the state has that new user stored on it. So instead what we want to do is call that action creator. Now, first of all, we need to import it over here. So let's import that. So import, and then it's sign in, and that's going to be from, and it's .. to come out of the auth, then .. to come out of components, then into store, then into actions, and then into auth actions. Okay, so now we need to map dispatch to props. So down here, let's come and say const map dispatch to props, like so. Make sure you spell this correctly. And this takes the dispatch, and inside this function, we want to return an object, and we want to attach to our props the method for signing in. So sign in is going to be a function. It's going to take that new user. We're going to pass it that in a second, and then it's going to make a dispatch, and it's going to call the action creator, which is sign in. And remember, we imported that right here. So we can call that and pass in the new user. Then we're going to receive it right here, yeah? Okay, not sign in, it's sign up, like so, and sign up. Okay, let's make sure we imported sign up over there. That's what we need. Okay, cool. So now what we can do is we can call this thing from our component. So right here where we try to submit, let's say this.props.sign up, and we're going to pass through this.state. So this.state represents the new user, which we then pass into this thing over here, right? Okay, cool. So let's try this out. Let's see if this works. I'm going to go to sign up. Then I'm going to say Mario at thenetninja.co.uk. Then the password will be test1234. First name is Mario. Don't know the second name, so let's just say plumber. And then sign up. All right then. So we get an error. And that's probably because down here, yep, we didn't say map dispatch to props. Okay, so remember to pass that in as a second parameter. So let's save that and try this again. So now if we say Mario at thenetninja.co.uk, password test1234, first name Mario, second name plumber, try to sign up, and we should get redirected to the home page. That's because when we sign up, we automatically get logged in, and we can see that over here, we're logged in. And remember, we placed a route guard on the sign up page to say anyone logged in should be redirected to the home page. So that's good. Now, if we look over here and refresh the authentication, we should see that new user. Okay, cool. We have that new user now. And if we look inside the database as well, we should have a users collection. And inside that users collection, there should be this new document. This is the user ID, and we have all of these properties right here. Awesome. So that is all working. Now then, what if we do this process incorrectly? What if we type in something, if we log out and try to sign up again, that's incorrect? Well, we catch that error and then we attach it to the state. So what we could do is map that to our props over here. So let's do it. Let's say auth error is going to be state, then it's .auth because it's on our auth reducer. And if we look inside the root reducer down here, we can see that the auth reducer stores data on the auth property on the state. So state.auth, then it's auth error. Okay, so now we can access this inside our component. So what I'm going to do is come up here and I'm going to use some destructuring to grab the auth error from the props. And then down here, we can add in this stuff. Now I've already added it in, it shouldn't be there for you, but all I've done is added div right here, and then I've output the auth error. I've checked to see if it exists first using the ternary operator. If it does, then we output this template, the auth error, and if it doesn't, we output nothing. So if we save that now and check this out in a browser, if I try to use like Mario at, or rather let's do Luigi now, Luigi at the Net Ninja, we don't add on the last bit, I'll do password test and then Luigi plumber. If I try to sign up now, then we get this error right here. The email address is badly formatted. Okay, so let's add that on, try again. Now we get password should be at least 6 characters. All right, so this is all coming from Firebase, attaching to our state, and then we're outputting it to the component. So now if we try to sign up, there's no errors, and now we're fine. So there we go, my friends. That is how we can sign up. Now, in the next video, I want to tackle this problem. We can see right here, it's showing NN for NetNinja, but really we want to show the initials of the current user. So we'll look at that in the next video.